All right, welcome to the beginning of Zentangling. As told to you before, Zentangling is an awesome, non-judgmental way to draw and to practice your doodle making skills. Really, Zentangling is just another glorified way to say doodling, but it's a great way to also practice repetition and pattern. What we're starting with here today is you'll notice that I have a Sharpie, a thin Sharpie, a regular felt tip pen, a pencil. Really, any drawing utensil works. If you even want to use watercolor with Zentangling, you can, but make sure you sketch out your basics with your pencil first. We're going to go ahead and get started into what the basics are of Zentangling. So grab some paper, a pencil, or anything you have handy, and let's get started. For our first Zentangle, we're going to start out pretty basic, and we're going to make what is called the frame. This frame is going to consist of just 4 points on our paper. And I'm just putting these in with pencil, but if you've already started with Sharpie because you're a little bit more daring and risky, then good for you. Give it a shot. After you've drawn your pencil marks or Sharpie marks, you're going to go ahead and connect your dots. Now your dots are going to be what we call your frame, is what you're connecting. And it could be a straight line, it can be a curved line, it can be a line with a loop in it if you want to get crazy. It can have curves, it can have weird arches. Any way you want this frame to look is totally up to you. Now that we have our frame in place, we're going to drop the string. When we talk about dropping a string when it comes to Zentangling or doodling or whatever, we're talking about if you actually were to take a string and lay it on a paper, what it would look like. So for this one, if I was to take my string, I could kind of curl it, have it come back, curl it again, the way it would look on a paper. But it could be any curve or direction you feel comfortable with. All right, having already started your Zentangle, we're going to go ahead and start your first actual design, which is called Tortuga. Those of you who have me before, you probably remember this design. Those of you who haven't, it's a great beginning design. If you've had me before, I encourage you guys to go ahead and click on the more advanced Zentangles because you've probably done this one before. I switched to my dark black felt tip just so that you can see a little bit better what I'm drawing. But if you want to stay with a pencil or whatever you decided to draw with, feel free. If I get a little bit fast for you guys, feel free to just pause me. I won't take it personally. So to start with, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make these little ladybug or half moon type shapes all the way around our paper. I went ahead and left a gap because I know my next step is to draw an aura for them. However, if you don't want to leave a gap, it's your drawing. Make sure you use it however you want. If you want to be creative, feel free. I'm going to switch to my thicker Sharpie. I'm going to go ahead and color in my little half moons because I like to give them a little bit of depth. One reason I like this Tortuga Zentangle is because it creates depth in a two-dimensional space just by line. For those of you who did the Vortex project with me, it's a great way to demonstrate how to do depth in a two-dimensional space. There is going to be a folder on our distance learning that has a whole bunch of optical illusion drawings that you are more than welcome to do. They are fun, but they're great at showing you how you can take something that's flat, a two-dimensional surface, and make it look 3. Create that form. One of those art elements, right? We're all about the art elements. All right. Fantastic. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to create that aura we talked about. And an aura is just a repeating of the design below. And it's going to go around the entire shape. And this is going to start to create the illusion that it's going in. Now you might have little hiccups, things like lines hitting each other, or like I have this loop here, so it makes me have to think, what am I going to do with this loop? I'm not going to worry about it. There's no right or wrong in Zentangling. I'll get to it when I get to it. I'll work it in the way I see fit, and until then, I'm not going to worry about it. Remember not to be like, oh, I messed up, because there really is no messing up in Zentangling. That's why we like starting with this. It just kind of loosens up the drawing joints, builds on our problem solving and creativity. Plus, it helps us with our pen control. You can start to see where you want to try to get these as close to equal as possible, but if not, that's okay too. Nobody's going to call you on it. It's your drawing. Zentangling comes in handy if you want to just decorate anything. Bookmarks, backs of fill-in spots for paintings, when you're doing cards. I'll be honest, it's a little bit harder to get in my creation space when I'm videotaping it. It makes me a little bit less relaxed, but we'll get there. This is a little bit of a learning curve. I always tell you guys I like to pester you. You thought that would end, ha ha ha. I'm back to pester you with Zentangling. Now, the closer to the center you get, you'll notice that the more lines and the closer the lines get, the more it naturally makes everyone see that there's distance forming in this drawing because of the direction that the lines are taking your eyes. Whenever we layer things, it lets us know that there's space there. Whenever things start to go further and further away, get smaller, we have a tendency to naturally think that it's a distance. For those of you that did that vortex project, this totally reminds me of it because it has that like Dr. Seuss type vibe. There's our first one. We're actually going to take our pencil and add a little depth to it by shading in. Remember, we have our shadows, our midtones, and our highlights. So we're actually going to shade in. So it's a little darker in the center, and as it comes up on these curves, it's a little darker on the edge of the curves. And it's going to be a highlight at the very top. So we're going to blend it up. Love value. It makes drawing so much more interesting when you add value to it. It's just amazing what value does for our brains and souls, right? Gotta love it. And I'm kind of just shading at the edges first because I know that would be where it would be the darkest all the way up. And then I'm creating some shadows here toward the base and lightening them up as they go up toward the top. We always talk about how science and art are so closely related. Part of it is the way that we see and observe and create is mostly through science-based philosophy anyway, because we don't see without light. And here we are making sure that this looks like it's going in because we're subtracting light with a graphite tool. I love drawing. So sometimes if you want, you can go back through and shade with your pencil at the very end, all of them all at once. For me, some people only want one Zentangle. I mean, you guys have a lot on your plate, I know, with other school assignments and such. So I want to make sure I at least get one bit of drawing out there that's almost a complete thought before you run off and do something else. If you want to be really specific, you can go back through and erase in highlights on some of these, on the very, very tip tops. That way it looks like it go down. And remember, if you did something completely different, like all of a sudden you were following me and you were like, what? I'm going to do this instead. And you tried it and it's totally different. And now you're like, how do I shade this? Just go back to your basic observations. Things that are further away are going to be darker. Things that are tucked behind are going to have a shadow from the things in front. And just go back through for the way we observe things are every day. You probably have it in your brain of how to shade it already. You just need to think about it. All right, so there's our first Zentangle. Notice this awesome, weird little loop right here. Yeah, I told you, these are not planned out. Don't panic. We'll figure this little guy out. We don't know what he's going to be, but it's going to be something special. We'll figure it out. So that's the beginning. That's your first one, Tortuga. Moving on to our second Zentangle. Our second Zentangle is one that's a little bit easier. It's called Hollenbaugh. Hollenbaugh is actually interesting because it's one of those Zentangles where it creates a lot of variety by creating straight lines. If you are somebody who needs a ruler because you like your lines really straight, no judgment space, go get a ruler. I like to wing mine because well, I don't have a ruler and I like to see how straight my lines can be without one, to be honest with you. Except when I laugh, whoa, right there. See that one? Woo, my bad. Anyway, so go through and just draw your lines. Your lines need to be thick. They need to be thin. They could be medium. They can go across. They go under. They go around. They go through. We want to make it look like a pile of pickup sticks. And we want them to go above and below, partially because, again, that awesome art element we keep talking about, space, is created by creating variety, which is one of our principles, but also by overlapping and changing things. It's easier to make sure you know how close or far away something is. So if I want this 2D space to look 3D, the more overlapping I do, the more likely that is going to happen. Remember, it's always easier to go under the ones that are already there. Unless you're using pencil. If you're using pencil, man, aren't pencils wonderful? Those magical unicorns. They come with those cool little horns that are erasers and you don't have to think twice about it. We jokingly call them unicorns. People lose unicorns all the time, but they're magical. So we're just going through and creating some different variety and space for our lines. Oh, I think that guy actually went crooked. Oh well. No right or wrong. Remember, Miss Petey said so, so do or don't. Isn't that a Yoda saying? Try or try, do or don't. There is no try or something like that. All right, so that's the beginning of it. Sorry, get distracted. Man, this is just like art class. We have our lines in place. We're going to add a dot to it, but also we're going to add shading, because that shading is really what's going to draw out the space involved in this piece, because there's going to be shadow between where these overlay or not. So, I'll add that later. We're going to look for a shadow anywhere it's falling under another space. If you have a blending stump or a tortillon, feel free to use it. I'm trying to stick with simpler supplies because I'm not quite sure what everybody has at home, but I know some of my advanced art students have some amazing supplies thanks to their parents, or their hard work and earning, I should say. Because my students work hard, and some of them I know did tasks around the house to earn theirs, or for neighbors. So wherever they overlap, you're really kind of giving it a shadow, giving it some depth. We're going to create some serious depth here in a second. Now remember, and I just messed this up, and I'll show you why. Because see, this line is so small, the shadow it would cast is actually relatively small too. You can't get crazy with it otherwise. It's not really a shadow, you're making a whole other shape. So after you get your shadows in, which depending on how thick your lines were, how many of lines you were, I know some of my students are very detailed and they can get crazy with it, and they're way more patient than I am. I'm like, slap those lines and let's do this. Some of them can be so tenaciously patient and just get down exactly what they want, which I love. This guy's kind of far at the back, so I'm going to give him a little bit more shadow all the way down. Highlight that guy a bit. Pull forward, push back. Remember, anything you shade in recedes. Anything you erase comes forward. Super important to remember, because we're going to make this whole thing recede here in a second by taking your Sharpie or your pencil or whichever your darkening tool is. And we're actually going to start shading in the inside of our Zentangle. Alright, so Hellenbad done. I figured you didn't want to watch me color in all my little shapes, but that's what it looks like when you're finished with it. Let's move on to Knight's Bridge. Knight's Bridge is kind of like one of those classical checkered patterns, but it's also curved, I guess, is the cool part about Knight's Bridge. Make sure that when you draw Knight's Bridge, you don't get too small on your squares. So when I draw it and I draw my line curves to the top. When I draw the next one, I want to make sure it's spaced the same. But just like our auras that we did at the top, we're going to keep it the same distance between the two and still curve it, because Knight's Bridge is curved. That's its cool, unique part of it. And it's just going to curve right up to the top. There are parts of it that are going to get cut off because it can't curve past, but that's okay. We're not worried. Keep the same width. Same little bit up here. And there's probably like a little boop right there. Now, to do the other part of Knight's Bridge, we're going to turn our sketchbook, and it's going to curve as well. It's going to curve up, same distance, up, same distance, up. Now, when we talk about line giving direction and space, Knight's Bridge just definitely gives the illusion of like a curved checkerboard because of the lines, which is awesome because we like that illusion of 3D and 2D. Now, honestly, the hardest part about Knightsbridge is the fact that you have to make sure that when you do your checker pattern that you're touching corners. So like, let's say I started here as my Knightsbridge. Wherever the corners of this square touch are going to be the next set of dark squares. So like this square is going to be one. This square is going to be one. A little tip, if you are using a pencil, if you use the side of your pencil instead of the tip of your pencil to shade things in, it makes things go a lot faster. That would be like, if this is my pencil and I'm shading something, make life easy. Go like this. Shade it in faster. That's why wooden pencils are magical, is because you can get such variety from the same tip. And if you have drawing pencil sets, those are extra magic because you can do your underdrawing and nobody will know where it was. Remember, if you are using Sharpie, that it is going to go through. It's going to bleed, so make sure you put something on the surface before you start using it. I'll probably make sure I make a note of that at the beginning, just in case you're like on your parents' best dining room table. You don't have to make them panic about using Expo to get it out. But if something does happen, do know that Expo will erase Sharpie. So anywhere the corners touch, that's where your checker pattern is. And the shading on the Knightsbridge is a tiny bit different because you're dealing with a space that is curved. So the top is going to become highlighted. The sides are what's actually going to have the shadow in Knightsbridge, and only really on the white squares, because black absorbs light, you wouldn't see the shadow on black. And again, corner touching. Wherever the corners touch, that's where we want to do the shading. Go back through and touch those up a tiny bit. If you have alcohol markers of any kind, they don't have to be Prisma, but like Artify makes a good set for like, I think I paid $30 for mine just because I go through them so fast. It's kind of nice because you can add color to this and still do your shadow, which our other Zentangles are in color, but I figure black and white's easier for videoing this first one. But they're fantastic for casting shadow on top of color because you can layer those markers a lot easier, and most come with a blender so you can blend in your shadow too. All right, so we got our Knightsbridge created. And we're going to do our shading on it. I'm going to go around just the outline of my frame so that these little squares aren't just hanging off the end without being part of the group. They feel so lonely. Sad little squares. There we go. All right. I like this guy right here. Putting him up too. All right, so now we're going to take our pencil, and again, same shading technique. We're going to use the edge of it on some of our white squares, and we're going to actually, since mine curves more like this direction, this is going to be where most of my highlights fall. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shade just lightly on my white on the edges and lighter when it hits that next section. And then I'm going to blend it with my finger. If you have a blending stump, even better. I don't mind getting messy. You do get messy. You guys already know that. And we're just blending it up a bit, creating a little bit of depth in the billow part of it. This corner looks a little lost, so we're going to give him some direction. And then we're going to leave our center ones fairly light. And then last but not least is our final Zentangle, which, as you can see, this one's Nightbridge. This one was Hollenbaugh. This one's Tortuga. Our very last one is, I think I might have swapped. Yeah, okay. I don't remember the name of it now that I'm on it. All right, so on to the last Zentangle. What you're going to do is you're going to draw your grid first. Now remember, your grid is going to have to be a little bit wider than normal because you want to be able to put our swirls, which we're going to make, in here. So kind of like Knightsbridge, you want to keep it the same distance even as you get to the end. If there's excess, there's excess. We're not going to worry about it. Oop. Got a little crazy right there. Hang on one second. And you're just going to set up your basic grid going across like that. So after we get our first grid drawn, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be drawing some spirals in here. I drew my grid with pencil, you might have noticed. That's mostly because I know I make mistakes when I draw grids sometimes. So if you don't want to just nail it on the first one or have to cover up a blemish, please feel free to use your pencil whenever intimidated. I'm going to go ahead and trace over my grid so you can see it a tiny bit better as I do this next step. So this Zentangle has it so you're going to actually create, I don't know, I think it looks like a cinnamon roll in a box, but you're going to take your pencil marker, whatever you're using at this time, and you're going to start a swirl. And your swirl is going to go further and further and further out until, yep, you hit the edge, but that's okay. We're still going to continue it right all the way to the corners, like it's going to blow apart the box. And we're going to do that in each and every one of these. I think they look like cinnamon rolls, but maybe that's because I've been on kind of a baking bender since this whole pandemic thing started. I just feel like baking and baking and baking. Wonder what that is. If you guys have any good recipes, you send them my way. My family will thank you. So here we're going to start our spiral. Notice that even though I have this line right here, I'm just pretending like it's not there. So I'm like going, I'm going. Okay, you don't like that? I'll stop. Going. Whenever I hit something, I stop and I pick it up on the other side. We're determined. We're not going to let that line stop us. I'm going to make like a dot in the center just because I think it looks cool. There we go. Oh. Just pretend like that didn't happen. Got a little line. There's like a random worm in my cinnamon roll. Ignore it. Wormy cinnamon rolls happen. So we're going to keep curving. Remember, repetition and pattern are awesome when it comes to practicing pen and pencil tension and just good old-fashioned fine motor skills. And it's funny because it's actually kind of hard to do this and talk at the same time because I'm so used to being able to draw and just, you know, hang my tongue out to the side and draw and be crazy focused, whereas when I'm recording I have to remember that I'm talking to other people. This is a good family activity if you want to get your siblings in on it. Now, the shading for this one, in order to create the depth and give it that 3D look, is going to be toward the edges because we want these spirals to kind of look like they're coming out of the squares. So I'll show you how that's going to happen next. Now remember, if yours doesn't look like mine, that doesn't make it right or wrong. That's awesome. It's your creation. It should look like whatever you want it to look like. If yours doesn't look, if you don't even have the same Zentangles as I do, that's 100% okay. It's more about interacting with the pen and the line, or the pencil and the line, and the focus that goes into creating something on paper. And more importantly, just not being afraid of it. Don't be afraid of drawing. This is a no judgment area. Nobody knows what you intended but you. It's kind of like when you're walking and you accidentally trip and you play it off as like you were doing this cool little skip thing. It's okay. Nobody else knows. It is what you make it. I don't know if you can hear those cop cars on the video, but they are not showing up at my house, if you're wondering. I know. Thanks, cops, for turning on those sirens now. Oh, we are almost done. Then all we have to do is bust out our shading, and you've officially made it through beginning Zentangling. I hope that my 6th graders at least did it. You never know. I hope some of you repeated it if you've done it before, and that you modified it into whatever you wanted it to be this time. Or just enjoyed the idea of having a little bit of quiet time to do what you want to do, because that's really what Zentangling is all about. Oh, I have this crazy little loop up here. I'm going to come up with the Zentangle and show you what that is toward the end. But your shading on this one, you kind of just do the corners. And then as it starts to come up on the cinnamon roll, I think I've officially named this one cinnamon roll. I don't know. It sounds right, doesn't it? Or cupcake. Maybe cupcake's a little cuter. And you're just going to make sure that those corners stay deep. Really kind of deep in these corners. Blending stump. You know, if Easter's coming up and your parents are like, don't you want mounds of candy? You can totally surprise them if you were like, no, I'd rather have a pack of Sharpies and a good blending stump. They'll be like, are you feeling all right? But it's a way better Easter gift. I promise you. Or some Prismacolor markers or pencils. Makes you happier in the long run. So then you're going to go ahead and just shade around, creating depth in our corners, blending with your finger. Remember, our shadows are deepest shadow, mid-tone, highlight. And I keep saying it over and over, partially because I don't want to have to do the whole lesson on shadow, mid-tone, highlight. I'm sure I will end up videoing it, but that lesson is so much more fun in person with charcoal. And not everybody has charcoal, so we're just gonna preach the value part. There's value in lightness and darkness of each color and of each shade, and we want that value to be a little bit dramatic. This is the only time in middle school I'm gonna tell you to be dramatic. Be dramatic when it comes to your drawing, because it's that drama that our eyes are naturally drawn to. So really kind of get those shadows working for you. Make some distance between you. Anything that you shade is going to recede. Anything you erase is going to come forward on your paper, because we're treating this like a hole or a room where we want things to come out and things to go in. And we want to guide people's eye to only where we want to see it. We don't want to give them too many options. This is our space. Ta-da! We're done. First Zentangle, check. If you have any questions, you can email me. They have little Zentangles for like these dots up here for mine. I don't even know. I might make it part of the weird cinnamon roll family. Like it escaped. Like it's a runaway cinnamon roll. Why not? Maybe we'll make some like, just so we know how special it is. But ow. Make sure you guys show me your work, email it to me, post it in the album that's below this in Schoology. It makes it so you guys can gallery walk and check out everybody's. It's just a great way to create community and to support each other and have some fun. Just to relax for once. I hope you guys have a good day, and I can't wait to see you back here. Bye.